Hey folks, Carla Sands here, putting in a plug for Gene Valentino's Grassroots Truthcast.
8 years ago, we developed and launched the best bed sheets ever. Since then, you've all enjoyed the best sleep of your life. And to thank you all for your support, we're bringing you our bed sheets for the lowest price in MyPillow history. Get our seasonal flannel sheets for 50% off. They're nearly sold out, so get yours today before they're gone. Check out our new Percale line. Queen size only $39.98. King size only $49.98. And our famous Giza Dream bed sheets, queen size originally $139.96. Wait on it. Now only $59.98. King's just $10 more. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get huge discounts on all MyPillow bed sheets. And for a limited time, when you order $75 or more, your entire order ships absolutely free. We have very low quantities at these prices, so order now.
With breaking news and political commentary from a public servant, serial entrepreneur, community leader, philanthropist, and American patriot, and a darn nice guy, it's time for the Grassroots Truthcast and your host, Gene Valentino.
Hi, friends. Gene Valentino, and welcome to another episode of Gene Valentino's Grassroots Truthcast. We have interesting guests every week on our show. This week's guest is Mr. Scott Walter. He's president of the Capital Research Center in Washington, D.C. Scott is a gentleman I met at the CNP conference in Nashville in the summer of 2024. We had a great conversation together then, where I had the privilege of getting his signed book entitled Arabella by Scott Walter. This is a book that involves a deep dive on the dark money network of the leftist billionaires secretly transforming this nation over the past decade in particular. Welcome aboard, Scott.
Great to be with you, Gene.
And we're going to get into a deep dive on this issue right after this. Hi, friends. Gene Valentino from the Grassroots Truthcast. Mike Lindell's been with us on our shows for nearly 3 years now. Go to mypillow.com, promo code GeneV, or you can call it in. It's 1-800-589-4706. Mike's was a one-problem solution company with one product, the pillow. Today, it's hundreds of items in his website, mypillow.com. Now he's gotten to a point where the word's gotten out, and they're having a $25 extravaganza. You can get a 2-pack multi-use pillow set for just $25. You got the MyPillow sandals for just $25. You also have their 6-pack bathroom towels for just $25 a set, and the brand new 4-pack dish towels, just $25. So they have an extravaganza underway right now with many super prices. Good time to start surfing mypillow.com and look through their entire store line of items for holiday gift giving this fall and winter. Thanks for joining us on Grassroots Truthcast, and thank you, Mike Lindell and the MyPillow family, for being our sponsor on Gene Valentino's Grassroots Truthcast. Welcome back to the Grassroots Truthcast. My guest today is Scott Walter, president of Capital Research Center. Welcome aboard, Scott.
Great to be here.
I'm very interested in Capital Research Center. As I mentioned in the intro, we had met at the CNP conference in Nashville, Tennessee in the summer of 2024. We stayed in touch. You gave me your book, you signed it, and you also had the chance to do a one-on-one with me in addition to the presentations you made to the public that was also attending. This is a book that involves, to me, probably something. It's almost like I'm saying, Scott, why didn't we know about this earlier? Why didn't we know about this sooner? The most important thing I read in your book was the closing statement. Let me read it to you, and then you take it from there. The choice America faces is between these two visions. Arabella's style of big philanthropy ganging up with big government to force the rest of us to live as our betters think we should, or the original American vision, where government is decentralized and limited so that the citizens can govern themselves and help each other through their families, their neighborhoods, and local groups. That's the end you concluded on. What's the book about?
Well, the book focuses on the Arabella entity, really best to call it a network. And it is completely the plaything of the wealthiest chunk of America, nothing remotely small d democratic about it, though it likes to pretend so. It is a network of billionaires, including billionaire foundations, and very sophisticated political operatives who want to manipulate the public in order to have control over our laws and public policy, which is to say, over the public. So the size is staggering. Just two numbers to make that clear. The Arabella network includes about a half dozen nonprofits, and those nonprofits in the 2020 election cycle, so 2019 and 20, Arabella's nonprofits took in $2.4 billion. That is
whoa, $2.4 billion.
Billion, which is, to put that in context, that's $1 billion more than the Democrat National Committee and Republican National Committee combined. And then in the 22 cycle, which you'd think, well, that's an off year. Surely it went down a little. Wrong. It wasn't 2.4. It was $3 billion, more than the DNC, the RNC, and both parties' Senate and House committees. So it is a behemoth of political power that still doesn't remotely get the kind of coverage it deserves, although I will take credit. Capital Research Center first uncovered it. It had never been reported on by anybody else, even though it started all the way back in 2005. And thanks to our good work, you now occasionally will read about it in places like the New York Times.
I am stunned with, and I understand your articles were not only in the New York Times, but the Wall Street Journal and other leading publications as well. And you had also exposed some of the high points of this. I see on the cover of your book three big characters we all know of in one way, shape, or form: Bill Gates, George Soros, and Mark Zuckerberg. Are these the main sources of funding in Arabella?
They're there precisely because they're the most recognizable sources, right? Everybody knows Zuckerberg, Soros, and Gates. And they are all three of those gentlemen are very significant donors into the Arabella network, but by no means are they the only donors. I literally fought with the publisher over how many billionaires to have on the cover. I wanted several more, and you could have gotten a lot more. But one of the most intriguing ones, which I'll mention because people, very few people will have heard of him, but he actually is one of the biggest donors to the Arabella network. He's a Swiss citizen by the name of Hans-Jörg Wyss, W-Y-S-S.
Wait a minute. You have a Swiss citizen, a billionaire, funding a 501c3 or C4 here in the States.
Both.
We can come back to that in a second. But they're funding a IRS designated category to, and I'm going to put words in your mouth, correct me if I'm wrong, to manipulate the election outcomes, the economy, political candidates, issues before the Supreme Court, manipulate the Supreme Court itself. And I could probably go on with district attorneys, state attorneys, and the like. A manipulation to control this, to transform this government in some way, to me is the biggest perpetration of a fraud. It's what China is probably doing very effectively, and that's eating America from within. What say you?
Well, you're not by any means simply wrong, but there's a great paradox in this, right? It is illegal for a Swiss national like Hans Wies to write money, to send money directly to a political candidate, okay? Now, he actually has done that, and that's completely on the record. In fact, you can go to the FEC database and put his name in and see over $100,000 worth of these very illegal donations. But that was in the past. He got smarter and stopped doing that. Unfortunately, nobody caught him before the statute of limitations expired. Let me throw out 3 names of people who were some of his grantees. Some of his preferred candidates. One was Dick Durbin. Another was one of the Udall family when he was in Congress. And another was Inslee. Wies gave to him in Congress. Now he is governor of, is it Oregon or Washington State? I'm embarrassed. It's Oregon, or anyway, Governor Inslee, when he was in Congress, got money from him. Now, as I said, that was the dumb way to do this because that's simply illegal. The complicated thing as to whether what you said is entirely accurate is it is not illegal for a foreign citizen like Wies to give money to a nonprofit. But that's because, of course, nonprofits theoretically aren't in the business of getting people elected. Now, of course, in the case of Arabella, that's kind of laughable. And pretty much nobody pretends anymore that Arabella is anything other than an appendage of the Democratic Party. So,
but they fought you initially and claimed there was a sort of an arm's length distant thing, sort of a puritanical approach to wanting to do good for health, wellness, society, contributing to the community, the environment. They had these high, lofty platitudes of correlation, when in fact they were really in funding the bowels of deep, dark political activity in local elections nationwide. Yes?
Well, and national elections. So here's the thing, right? This is where things get extra tricky. So one type of political nonprofit is the 501c4. And don't worry if you don't know your tax code. It's real simple. That's National Rifle Association, League of Conservation Voters. It's those kind of political nonprofits. Now, those political nonprofits are allowed to give money to super PACs. A foreign citizen cannot give money to a super PAC, but a foreign citizen can give money to a political nonprofit that just so happens to give money to super PACs.
And does that contributor to the 501c4 is he disclosed? Is the American public aware of who's contributing to that 501c4?
The C4s that get the money are not required to tell anybody, not even confidentially the IRS.
Wow.
Who gave them money. Now, at Capital Research Center, we're very savvy about all the ways you can track some of the money, and we track every penny that you can. So in the case of Mr. Wies, he has his own 501c4 actually attached to his charitable foundation, which is he's not the only person on the planet to do that, but that is an extremely rare thing. And so he has his own C4, which then gives money to an Arabella C4. And coincidentally, the Arabella C4 will give money to super PACs. Now, I must say that Arabella and Mr. Wies swear up and down that they carefully segregate these monies and that Mr. Wies's monies do not go to, voter registration or political ads or super PAC contributions. However, they've never offered a shred of evidence of that claim. And by the way, even though places like there was a Bloomberg reporter who did a sycophantic article about Wies, really it was a total defense of Wies article. And that reporter, if what they claim is true, they should have gone to the reporter and said, look, we can't let you make our books public, but we'll let you look at them, to have a confidential look at them. You just can't, take pictures and report the details, but look here at our books. Look how carefully we segregate this money. they could have done that to this sycophantic friendly reporter, and they didn't do it. So I think that's pretty significant circumstantial evidence that they do not, in fact, do anything like that.
Folks, we're talking with Scott Walter from the Capital Research Center, America's Investigation Unit. It's very patriotic investigative think tank that's helping us understand through their efforts, specifically in the last decade, the revelations coming forward now about deep state, dark money that has infiltrated. And it's very strange, Scott. These billions of dollars, correct me if I'm wrong, 100% of the money has gone to the Democrat Party causes and candidates. Yes?
It would be hard to claim that much didn't go in that direction. And in fact, you have very non-conservative sources like CBS and the New York Times that use almost that exact language to describe what Arabella does.
Okay, if that is the case, then my concern is that the rhetoric, I use that word cautiously, the rhetoric that the networks used in trying to quash rumors of election interference, election fraud in 2020, the vaccine and the COVID issues since 2019, the staged efforts by Bill Gates in parallel for population reduction, and all of these strategies within the nation seem to have been perpetrated with and through the Democrat Party, with and through the elected officials coming out of the Democrat Party, which begs the question, where did they get their money to initiate a lot of these activities? And why didn't the Republicans step up more staunchly to do something about it sooner?
Well, as for where they get money again from a whole slew of left-wing billionaires. One of our things we always say at Capital Research Center is George Soros is as bad as you think, but you've got to understand that the left has a lot of Soroses. It has Gates and Zuckerberg and Pierre Omidyar and Reid Hoffman and Laurene Powell Jobs and on and on and on. And almost every one of those lefty mega donors goes through, puts a good bit of money into the Arabella network. And there's a whole nother class of billionaires that are very important to understanding American politics and Arabella. I like to say there are a bunch of billionaires that all have the same last name involved in this. And I'm going to tease you, Gene. What do you think that last name is?
I would say Gates or Soros.
Those are understandable guesses, but you're wrong. What I mean is all those billionaires that have the same last name foundation, because the Ford Foundation is every bit as wicked and powerful as George Soros is. The MacArthur Foundation, Carnegie, on and on. There are lots of billionaire foundations. Pretty much all of them have been captured by the left, even if they were started by some staunch, capitalist pig business guy.
Yeah.
The left is very greedy and very sneaky. And so another would be the Pew Charitable Trusts, which control way over $1 billion. And they were started by rock-ribbed oil men who were also Republicans, but not that many years ago got captured by a very crafty woman named Rebecca Reimel. So those billionaires put tons of money into Arabella and otherwise profoundly affect and harm our politics.
Folks, we're talking with Scott Walter from the Capital Research Center in Washington, D.C. Scott, Capital Research Center, a not-for-profit itself?
We ourselves are a 501c3 public charity, legally speaking.
And you're getting let me throw a plug in for you at this point. How do we help Capital Research Center? How are you funded?
We are funded by the generous donations of individuals and foundations. Virtually nothing comes from corporations, and absolutely nothing comes from government. We have a blood oath. We never have and never will take a penny of government money of any kind.
Bravo. And so how do you compare a Carnegie Foundation or any of the others that have been funding these very left initiatives? I'd like to give them the benefit of the doubt, but your book is telling me otherwise. There's too much of a pattern here for it to be. I want to say, well, maybe some donor authorizing the funds within the hypothetically the Carnegie Foundation has given $100,000 to one of the tentacles in the Arabella group unknowingly. Yes, no, is that a false assumption?
There's actually a very good book by a liberal reporter. I highly recommend it. It's called The Victory Lab: The Secret Science of Winning Campaigns. So a superb job of reporting about the whole left-wing infrastructure that wins elections for them. And a crucial part of that is this 501c3 tax-exempt nonprofit world, which has both private foundations like Carnegie and Ford and Soros' Open Society, and then public charities with names like Voter Participation Center, right? They pretend that this is nonpartisan civic participation, whatever that means, right? But here's the bottom line. Here is what the liberal reporter in his book says, that the Carnegie Foundation was using nonprofits to gin up Democratic votes outside the campaign finance laws that restrict parties and political action committees. So, and Carnegie was one of those. The same entities are funded by Ford, Open Society, and many more.
There's something too pervasive here, though, Scott. I don't understand how our system of the election process in general, confused, in fact, by the way we've transcended some of the authority to the state levels through our secretaries of state and supervisors of election, is muddied. It's as clear as mud as to why we've allowed the election process to be interfered with. And more importantly, now that it's been revealed, what are we doing to fix it? Any comment?
Well, as for the cause of this, one big cause is that for decades, this has been central to the way the left wins elections. But what did that liberal reporter's book, what was the subtitle? The Secret Science, right? Because this is not something that gets talked about in the editorial pages of the New York Times. They're not out there explaining this stuff to you. There was one weird exception to that. I bet you remember this. Time magazine, a few months after the 2020 election, ran an article. Do you remember that one?
Yes, I do. Yes,
yeah,
I do.
It was ever so slightly askew from the truth or the full truth, but it actually had a lot of the truth in there because they literally used, it was very left-wing reporter, Molly Ball, awful reporter, grossly biased, but she used the words conspiracy and cabal in the election. So, and she told you about this a lot. Let's put it this way. The prehistory of what she said about 2020 election, the prehistory of all those groups and the people. In fact, the person she called the architect of the conspiracy was Michael Podhorzer, the political director of the AFL-CIO, who was central to organizing all this vast network of lefty efforts, right? Now, who features very prominently in that book, The Victory Lab, The Secret Science of Winning Campaigns? Michael Podhorzer. So the Victory Lab book, which came out almost a decade earlier, actually tells you the full truth about what these people are up to. And Time magazine admitted they were all conspiring and working together for the election. The hilarious lie, though, is that, Gene, all they were doing is they were fighting for democracy. They were obsessed with the election. They were meeting constantly, hundreds of times to engage in the election. But you know what? All of these left-wing partisans, they apparently never talked about who was going to win the election. They just wanted to save democracy in the election without any thought to who might win. Now, if you believe that, boy, do I have a bridge to sell you.
I see that the money coming from these not-for-profits supporting a Democrat agenda, a deep leftist, Marxist, socialist agenda, seem to be talking about people, vitriol. They're angry with what they have now, but they offer no solution. I hear about all these ideologies, but I don't hear about solutions. I hear about attack mode and this guy's no good, but I have no solution. For example, people are anxious to take out Donald Trump in different ways and have tried, but they don't have a solution. I'm looking today at an economic plan from Kamala Harris for her proposed election going forward, not to mention the last 3.5 years that she served. And I see no success. I see no results. I see nothing. All they do is attack and diminish and demean, deflect, distract, and divert. There's a few D's for you, in addition to Democrat. But I don't see any solution. What I'm asking from you is, if America now sees the good results of capital research and what you've been doing here, what is your plan to bring a solution forward? Is it through the president because you fear the legislative branch of our government is still inept? Is it through the judiciary because they finally have come to reason about what's been defective even within their own branch of government? Or do you go straight to the president and have him unilaterally exercise authority as he did, whether it was a wall or wrongdoing in Israel and the East, or in this case, our election process? What do you think is the approach for capital research?
Well, there are a few things. One thing I would start with is we have to understand the left built this massive infrastructure up over the course of decades.
Yeah.
And it is, so this is, fighting, it's not disappearing anytime soon. So we have to be sober about the challenge. Plus, of course, America is designed to be a place where people with lots of different viewpoints are around, right? And I'm not saying you're not suggesting this, but again, just we have to remember this, right? Are there going to be rich left-wing people who think things that a lot of us think are ridiculous? Yes. And are they going to be able to spend their money to magnify their voice, pushing ridiculous ideas? Yes. But on the other hand, there are some things that can be done about this nonprofit world. The first and foremost, what we're doing right here. It is really important that people understand this. Again, the conservatives tend not to use the nonprofit world for voter registration and things like that in the way that the left does. So we don't even realize what a major factor this is in the elections, because we don't do it. We don't know how much, we don't appreciate how much they do it. So you've got to get educated, which is exactly what you're doing right here. That's critical. The other thing is, by the way, that hurts a place like Arabella, right? Arabella is a Wizard of Oz operation. If you remember the great movie, right? Dorothy sees the wizard and she's terrified because big, scary, right? But then when the curtain gets pulled back, it's just some old guy at a microphone. Well, is the wizard as powerful over her? Is it as influential and critical? No. So when you pull the curtain back on Arabella and it literally has hundreds of fake groups, right? Like Keep Iowans Healthy and Center for Secure and Modern Elections, on and on, Floridians for a Fair Shake. Oh, literally hundreds of these things. Those things are a lot less powerful if people immediately realize, oh, that's just some fake group that Arabella folks did. So education is a big part of this and a starting point for this. Now, as for specific remedies, one of the top ones that we always talk about is at Capital Research Center is the law is fuzzy about what charities and private foundations can do on voter registration, which, according to the smartest people on the left, whom I listen to, is the far and away the number one way for a rich leftist to invest in winning elections. They literally will tell you 4 to 10 times more votes per dollar by giving it to charities that will register the right people and turn them out. So here's the thing. The law currently is fuzzy. The law says that a charity or a private foundation may get engaged in voter registration as long as it's done in a nonpartisan manner. Well, that's never spelled out. It's very fuzzy and unclear. And of course, Lois Lerner and the people who still work it there, who are just like Lois Lerner, do not rigorously enforce that against any left-wing groups. So, and I can tell you right now, that is not a solution, right? The IRS, you can give up on IRS doing a good job of enforcement. It's never going to do a good job of enforcement. The better thing, rather than enforcing that fuzzy line, would be for Congress simply to say, a private foundation cannot fund voter registration of any kind, and a public charity cannot conduct it.
Okay.
You need a big black line on that.
So
Just can't do it.
I agree with you, but how do elections get funded then?
Well, we have tons of ways to fund elections, right? I mean, there are two political parties, and there are also other nonprofits like the NRA or the League of Conservation Voters, or Planned Parenthood Education Fund, yada. There's a bajillion places which may legally do partisan voter registration work and get out the vote work above all the parties. So there's no shortage of ways for that to happen. And in fact, by the way, this is part of the left-wing scheme. The campaign finance reform, quote unquote, restricted money from the political channels.
That's right.
Where there is disclosure, and it strangled the parties. Well, of course, money like water is going to find a way, right? So if it can't go through the parties, which is where it mainly should be going, it'll find some other thing. And that's how you began to get such a massive amount of nonprofit left-wing turnout operations.
But what do you think? I can accept their money obviously means more votes in one sense, but how about election integrity, ballot fraud?
There's lots to be done. You're totally right. That's another question, which is the whole process of the way elections are carried out. Now, let me reassure you on something, by the way. This is something the left has totally failed in, the persuasion side. The left wants you to think that if you're in favor of voter ID, you're a Ku Klux Klan racist. Yeah. And by the way, that would be completely accepted at the New York Times or NBC, right? That's just taken for granted. But let me tell you, Gene, huge majorities of Americans, every demographic I'm aware of, every race, ethnicity, even registered Democrats, there's a majority in all these groups that support voter ID laws, because of course Americans aren't stupid. Of course you should have voter ID laws. That's a no-brainer, right? It's one important part of election integrity. Everybody knows that, and it's totally accepted, and it is increasingly becoming the law of the land. It's not as much as it should be, but increasingly. And then another thing that's obvious is that massive vote by mail, right? I mean, anyone who actually studies the history of debates over how to conduct elections, they know that everyone's always understood that vote by mail is one of the top ways to diminish election integrity. After the very controversial 2000 election, when it was George W. Bush and Al Gore, and there was, weeks of fighting about the election. After that, President Jimmy Carter, a Democrat, and James Baker, a longtime Republican top operative and campaign director for Republicans, they had a bipartisan commission to study how elections should be run. And one of the top findings was obviously vote by mail is a big way to weaken election integrity, which means to hurt democracy by diminishing people's trust in elections. But the left
right now you have a situation where you've got a Pennsylvania early voting schedule coming out, and it's going to happen literally days before the first debate, the only debate maybe, if there's a debate at all, between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. So here you have early voting being offered to the citizens of Pennsylvania before they are able to vet assess the merits of one candidate over the other, which is inconsistent, by the way, with 49 other states and the districts and the other territories. Folks, we're talking with Scott Walter. He's president of Capital Research Center in Washington, D.C., a not-for-profit organization that's working legitimately, not with government dollars, but with yours. So before we close in the limited time we have left, Scott will give out a contact information. You can get on their website, and I'm certain contribute to and donate to them. They have revealed some interesting information, which I discovered first at the CNP conference in Nashville in the summer of 2024. Scott gave me his book, Arabella, the dark money network of leftist billionaires secretly transforming America. It frustrates me, as I said earlier, that we didn't jump on this sooner. But in the book, I'll just show you page 18 real quick. You can see the network that they created, which I'd ask Scott to highlight just briefly. You've got a 501c3 in the middle called Arabella Advisors. Around that inner core is an entity, a 501c4 called New Venture Fund. Another one is called the North Fund, the 1630 Fund, Hopewell Fund, and Windward Fund. Scott, you want to explain these 501c4s that are around the corpus of Arabella Advisors?
Sure. For that illustration, I like to think of it as a solar system, right? And in the center, the sun that gives life to and creates the planets circling around it. The sun is Arabella Advisors. That actually is a for-profit company, right? This is part of the weirdness, that a for-profit company is actually creating and operating nonprofits, essentially for its benefit. That's not simply illegal, but it's very unusual, rare. Now, so that's the center, is the for-profit company. The planets around it, there's the largest of the 501c4 political nonprofits they run is the 1630 Fund, but they also have the C4 North Fund. Then there are 3 501c3 charities. That's all 501c3 means. They're charities, technically. And the largest of those is New Venture Fund, and then they also have Hopewell and Windward Fund. Now, the way Arabella wants you to think about it, and the legal fiction involved, is that the 1630 Fund, their largest political nonprofit, hires Arabella Advisors to manage itself, right? But in fact, of course, it was really Arabella that created the 1630 Fund. And similarly with the other planets, that legally they hire the for-profit entity to manage themselves. Now, the way this works, let's say you're a billionaire, lefty billionaire who walks through the front door of Arabella Advisors, and you say, okay, I want to take over politics in North Carolina. I want to, have a big, powerful push in North Carolina. Arabella is going to tell you, okay, that's fine. We'll create North Carolinians for Good Government, right, at the New Venture Fund. It's really just an accounting code at this New Venture C3. And then we'll also create North Carolinians for Good Government Action Fund. And that's going to be a C4 effort, but really it's just a project of the 1630 Fund. So you, Mr. Billionaire, are going to write one check from your foundation maybe to the C3 New Venture Fund, and another check, probably not on your foundation's account, to the C4. And those together will operate in North Carolina to work your will.
Yeah, I want to thank you for clarifying my misstatement about the 501c3s and C4s. It's what most citizens and consumers and voters get glazed over with, and the gloss of confusion. This diversion, deflection, distraction is nothing more than a conspiracy on the left's part to deflect your attention away from what's really going on. They're pushing, as you said in your book, a centralized form of government where the select few at the top are basically trying to control things at the expense of the many. So the whole spirit of democracy or constitutional republic, where we are grassroots, ergo my name, Grassroots Truthcast, where the grassroots, the folks, get a chance to participate, doesn't happen in a left-wing conspiracy of dark money where the select few are controlling the many. Ergo, Mark Zuckerberg, censorship with his social media platforms, Bill Gates with depopulating the globe, Soros with his tentacles puppeteering many in the different arms and legs of government. You want to comment on the global level of what the Capital Research Center is going to be doing in the next 12 months to try to transform this, make people more aware, and correct the wrongs of the past that we're now exposing?
Sure. We testify quite regularly, both in state legislatures. In fact, my last testimony was a couple of months ago to the Texas Senate, precisely about foreign money in elections and the nonprofit abuses in elections. And by the way, at the end of that hearing, they voted to begin subpoenaing a lot of these bad left-wing actors, demanding information out of them, which I believe will be even more damning. You know, we only get the external things. We at Capital Research watch them closely, but there are limits to how much publicly available information there is. Subpoenas can make internal communications public. Also, just this week, I'm happy to say that Claudia Tenney, who's a congresswoman from New York, she serves on the Ways and Means Committee in the House, which oversees the entire tax-exempt sector. She put out a letter this week demanding that the IRS look into the Voter Participation Center, which is one of the biggest abusers on the left. And I've testified to the House Ways and Means Committee this past year about all of this, and I continue to be in touch with them from time to time as we learn more information. So Congress definitely has a role in investigating this, both the bad actors among the charities and also the bad actors among the donors to the charities. So also, there are constantly new information coming out about these various entities, or that we just dig up. One of the things that we've dug up, for instance, is in Facebook ads. You can see if I take out a political Facebook ad, and I target it to avoid certain groups, right? Avoid certain people with certain interests, and include people with other interests, right? Well, you can look at that, and I can only tell you, Gene, it's scary, but it's also hilarious. So the Voter Participation Center, for instance, the list of all the interests that they'll exclude from their Facebook ads are, see if any of this, if this fits anybody, people who like NASCAR or Indy 500, people who like golf, right? All kinds of things that are obviously Republican aligned things. And then on the includes, it will be all sorts of things targeting the demographics that have the best votes for Republicans. And again, that's the Voter Participation Center, a charity that is by law supposed to be completely nonpartisan. So we're digging out more and more examples like that of their bias and partisanship.
Scott Walter, in our last 3 minutes, you and I go back to I go back to the Eisenhower administration. I won't speak to you, but certainly the Kennedy administration. We probably were young tots when we witnessed the assassination of John F. Kennedy. We saw the evolution of our constitutional republic over the decades. We come to a point now, and just before airtime on this show, you and I chatted, and one of the things I brought up was the fact that things seem to be accelerating quicker than in the decades previous. I might suggest that it has something to do with social media communication, our electronic mediums of communication. And as a result, we're learning things quickly, faster than ever before, geometrically faster than before. My concern is, how would you compare the wrongdoing of a Biden administration to a Obama administration, to a Clinton administration? What have you seen going on that you're trying to remedy now, and how fast can you move to put the put the plug in the dam for what seems to be serious leaks in our system of justice?
Well, let me say, just speaking for myself personally, because again, I run a C3, so it's not my job to get people elected or unelected. But speaking
Right.
personally, I find myself regularly saying that now that he's no longer a candidate, the Biden family and administration, they make Obama look moderate and the Clintons look honest. And it is certainly true that in my lifetime, which is almost that long, I was born in the Kennedy administration, that the left and supremely the thing that hurts ordinary Americans, namely the centralization of power in Washington, D.C., that has accelerated. And it makes me very fearful because that is the complete opposite of the actual American founding and the principles that we're supposed to be governed by. Where, yes, ordinary people, even people who don't live in the Washington, D.C. suburbs, are allowed, or not billionaires, are allowed to have a big say in the way their life works. I want America to be governed from the grassroots up. I want strong local communities. I do not want the government in D.C., so easily manipulable by billionaires, to be telling folks in California or Iowa or Mississippi or Wisconsin how they can live.
And how can people contact Capital Research Center and be part of this initiative to remedy, to be an investigator and to be part of your think tank and to maybe remedy some of these ills that have accelerated specifically in the last decade?
Capitalresearch.org, capitalresearch.org, that's capital with an AL, is our main website, and you can sign up to get a weekly email that gives our greatest hits of the week in research. You also can use the website to donate, either online or you can find the address for donations. I also would urge people to look at another website we run, influencewatch.org, influencewatch.org. That is a Wikipedia of the left. You will lose 5 hours of your life the first time you go there because you'll go down so many rabbit holes, but it's as documented and more objective than Wikipedia.
And you'll gain a few hours to your life after you spend a few hours to your life buying Scott's Arabella is the name of the book, The Dark Money Network of Leftist Billionaires Secretly Transforming America by Scott Walter, my guest today on Grassroots Truthcast. Scott, I want to thank you. One of the things that stands out that I can't walk off the show without bringing it up again. The last election was 2022. It was an off year because it wasn't a presidential election. And you had mentioned in this book that over $3 billion was generated. That's more money than the Republican and Democrat fundraising combined. We were part of a fundraising initiative for a very prominent United States senator recently. We hope to raise him a few $100,000. But when you're competing against $3 billion from a deep state network, I don't care how much money you raise in the neighborhoods to help out a little politician. What's going on here? How do we stop it and make it what it should be, what our founding fathers intended it to be?
Well, again, having the charitable sector go back to being charitable and not political, including by things like just taking voter registration out of the sector completely, that sort of thing has to happen before we go back to a world like you describe and like most Americans want.
Folks, we're running out of time, so you've got to reach out to Capital Research Center. Scott Walt, you can find their website and contribute and donate to their cause as a not-for-profit entity. And you can also subscribe to their weekly newsletter. You can do that on Grassroots Truthcast too, www.grassrootstruthcast.com. Please subscribe, and you'll find this episode as one of the continuing episodes on the Grassroots Truthcast. Scott, I'd like to thank you for joining us today.
Really appreciate it.
It's really been enlightening. You know, folks, this is one of the many episodes we do to try to protect our democracy, our constitutional republic, and to hopefully keep you more informed about those things that are good about what we are and those things that need improvement, which is what we need to do. Thank you for joining us again for another episode on Gene Valentino's Grassroots Truthcast. Hi, friends. Gene Valentino from the Grassroots Truthcast. You've got to join us not only for the great shows and entertainment and guests, but you got to join us because our sponsorship is growing, and it would mean a lot to them, not to mention me, if you come on board. And the one we're featuring this week is Luis Sanchez from the Cigar Shop. He owns a company called La Tradición Cubana. The Cigar Shop, Miami, Florida, since 1995. This Luis is really one heck of a guy. He's determined to manufacture cigars based on an unprecedented excellence in quality using old-fashioned Cuban methods. The cigar isn't always cheaper, but it is better. And if, like you're drinking a fine wine, you got to have a fine cigar, look for Luis Sanchez at the Cigar Shop. He helped me find a nice Connecticut wrapper with a Nicaraguan blend. And this cigar has become not only my enjoyment, but this cigar has also become my brand and my marketing tool. If you notice up close, we've got a little label he's put on there for me. And that's my website, genevalentino.com. It's at the Grassroots Truthcast. Now, here's the deal. You go to thecubanshop.com, find the cigar you want, and Luis will throw in the labels for free. But you got to tell him Gene sent you. Tell Luis Gene sent you. The labels are free. These are $50 to $100 values based on the count. And you can get this to become part of your branding experiment. I'm using this with my guests on the Grassroots Truthcasts. This could be your brand on your product, your service, anywhere in the world. Look for Luis Sanchez at thecubanshop.com. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy your smoke.
Thanks for joining us for Gene Valentino's Grassroots Truthcast. Be sure to like and subscribe, and God bless America.